The book of Revelation stands out as the only prophetic work in the New Testament, occupying a unique place in biblical literature. Written by the Apostle John during his time in Ephesus, this enigmatic text has intrigued and inspired readers for centuries. Its importance transcends time, offering guidance and hope to those willing to face challenges in the name of their faith. Revelation is not just a narrative of future events, but a powerful testimony of divine sovereignty amidst human tribulations. As we delve into its pages, we are invited to contemplate realities beyond our everyday understanding, challenging our perceptions and expanding our spiritual vision. The uniqueness of Revelation is not limited to its content, but also its structure and purpose. Unlike other New Testament books, which focus on teachings, historical narratives, or pastoral letters, Revelation presents a cosmic vision of the divine plan. Its symbolic language and vivid imagery create a rich tapestry of meaning, inviting the reader to decipher its hidden messages. To truly benefit from reading this book, it is recommended to approach it with a spirit of humility and seeking. Consider joining a Bible study group focused on Revelation or seeking commentary from respected scholars to enrich your understanding. John, the author of Revelation, was no stranger to divine revelations. As the beloved disciple of Jesus, he had already witnessed extraordinary events during his earthly ministry. However, the experience of receiving and recording revelation was entirely different. Imagine yourself in John's place, isolated in Patmos, confronted with visions that challenge human comprehension. His challenge was not only to witness these revelations, but to convey them in a way that could be understood and applied by believers across generations. This task required not only literary skill, but also profound spiritual sensitivity. Revelation serves as a guide for those willing to stand firm in their faith, even in the face of adversity. In a world where commitment to principles may seem costly, John's words offer comfort and courage. He reminds us that faithfulness to God is not just a personal choice, but part of a larger cosmic drama. When facing challenges in our daily lives, we can draw inspiration from the visions in Revelation. Whether dealing with pressures at work, family conflicts, or personal crises, the message of perseverance in the book can be a source of strength. Ask yourself, how can I apply the courage demonstrated by the faithful in Revelation to my own journey? The relevance of Revelation is not limited to the religious context. Its images and themes have permeated popular culture, influencing literature, art, and cinema. Works like J.R.R. Tolkien's The Lord of the Rings and the Wachowski brothers' Matrix series incorporate elements that echo apocalyptic visions. This cultural influence demonstrates the enduring power of the images and concepts presented in the book. By studying Revelation, you are not just exploring an ancient text, but connecting with a source that continues to shape the collective imagination. Consider how contemporary narratives of conflict and redemption may have their roots in this prophetic text. Revelation also invites us to reevaluate our understanding of time and history. While many readers focus on predictions of future events, the book actually encourages us to live with urgency and purpose in the present. The promise of final judgment and a new creation should not paralyze us with fear, but motivate us to live with integrity and compassion. Reflect on how the eternal perspective presented in Revelation can influence your daily decisions. How would you live differently if you truly believed that every action has eternal consequences? For the early readers of Revelation, living under the threat of persecution, the book offered a transformative perspective. It assured them that despite appearances, God was in control and that injustice would not have the last word. This message remains relevant in our modern world, where many face oppression and uncertainty. Revelation reminds us that history has a purpose and that our struggles are not in vain. When confronted with discouraging news or seemingly hopeless situations, turn to the promises of Revelation. Let its vision of ultimate victory inspire hope and courage in your life. As we conclude our reflection on the uniqueness of Revelation, it is important to recognize that this book is not just a text to be studied, but a message to be lived. Its promise of renewal and divine justice challenges us to live differently in the present. Revelation invites us to see beyond appearances, resist conformity to unjust systems, and maintain our integrity even when it is costly. As you continue your spiritual journey, allow John's visions to expand your horizons and deepen your faith. Revelation is not just a book about the end times, it is a call to live with purpose and hope at all times. The unique transmission of revelation is a fascinating aspect that deserves our attention. Unlike other books of the Bible, this text followed a celestial path before reaching John's hands. Imagine a divine chain of communication, originating from God, passing through Jesus Christ, then an angel, and finally reaching the apostle. This chain of transmission is not just a curious detail, but a testament to the importance and authenticity of the message. It reflects a celestial hierarchy where each link adds a level of authority and significance to the revelation. Contemplating this unique process invites us to reflect on the nature of divine communication. What would it be like to receive a message that passed through such celestial intermediaries? For John, it was certainly an overwhelming experience. We can imagine the weight of responsibility he must have felt being chosen as the final recipient of such an important revelation. This method of transmission highlights not only the message itself, but also John's special role as a channel between the divine and the human. The uniqueness of this transmission also speaks to the nature of God himself. We see a creator who does not remain distant, but who engages in communicating vital truths to humanity. This elaborate method of revelation suggests a God who values order and hierarchy, but also earnestly desires to connect with his creation. It is a reminder that no matter how transcendent God may be, he remains accessible and eager to communicate with us. Reflecting on this chain of communication, we can ask ourselves, how does this apply to our own quest for spiritual guidance? While we may not expect apocalyptic visions, we can be attuned to the subtle ways the divine might manifest in our lives, perhaps through sudden insights during meditation, words of wisdom from a mentor, or even through life circumstances. The key is to maintain an attitude of openness and receptivity, just as John demonstrated. The role of Jesus Christ in this chain of transmission is particularly significant. As a mediator between God and humanity, he serves as a divine interpreter, translating celestial truths into a form that can be comprehended by mortals. This function of Christ in Revelation echoes his broader role in Christian theology as the way to the Father. It reminds us that in our quest for spiritual understanding, Christ remains the focal point, the lens through which we can begin to glimpse divine realities. The presence of an angel in this chain of communication adds another intriguing element. Angels frequently appear in the Bible as divine messengers, but here we see one involved in transmitting a revelation of cosmic scale. This invites us to consider the role of celestial beings in our own spiritual journey. While we may not see angels, we can be open to the idea that forces beyond our understanding may be working to guide and protect us. This unique method of transmission also serves to authenticate the message of revelation. In a world where people might be skeptical of new revelations, this divine chain of communication confers undeniable authority to the text. For early Christian readers facing persecution and doubt, knowing that these words came directly from God, through Christ, an angel, and the beloved Apostle John, must have been a source of great comfort and certainty. Finally, the unique transmission of revelation reminds us of the importance of being faithful channels of truth in our own lives. Just as John received and faithfully transmitted this revelation, we are called to be ambassadors of divine truth in our world. This might mean sharing words of encouragement with a friend, standing up for justice in our community, or simply living in a way that reflects the values of God's kingdom. The question that remains is, how can we be effective channels of divine truth and love in our own spheres of influence? The book of Revelation is a rich tapestry of images and symbols, woven to describe events of cosmic proportions. This symbolic language is not just a literary ornament, but an essential tool for conveying truths that transcend our everyday understanding. As we dive into this text, we are transported to a realm where dragons represent evil forces and a lake of fire symbolizes eternal judgment. These symbols are not mere elements of fantasy, but keys to unlocking deep meanings about the nature of good and evil and the ultimate fate of humanity. The use of symbolism in Revelation serves several purposes. Firstly, it allows complex and often frightening truths to be communicated in a way that the reader can process and understand. Imagine trying to describe spiritual realities using only literal language. It would be like trying to explain colors to someone who has never seen. Symbols act as a bridge between the tangible and the intangible, the known and the unknown. One of the most powerful symbols in Revelation is the dragon, often identified as representing the devil or Satan. This image evokes a sense of power, danger, and malevolence that goes beyond what simple words could convey. By visualizing evil as a dragon, John helps us understand the magnitude of the spiritual threat we face. However, it is crucial to remember that, as terrifying as the dragon may seem, it is ultimately defeated in the divine plan. The lake of fire, another vivid image in Revelation, serves as a powerful symbol of final judgment and eternal separation from God. This metaphor confronts us with the seriousness of the spiritual choices we make in life. It is not an image meant to instill fear, but to inspire serious reflection on the final destiny of the soul. How can we apply this understanding in our daily lives? Perhaps by considering more carefully the consequences of our actions and decisions. The four horsemen of the apocalypse are perhaps some of the most well-known symbols of the book. Representing conquest, war, famine, and death, they personify the forces that shape human history. Meditating on these horsemen invites us to recognize the ongoing presence of these forces in our world. However, Revelation assures us that, as powerful as these horsemen may seem, they are ultimately under divine control. The number 7 appears repeatedly in Revelation, symbolizing completeness and perfection. We have 7 churches, 7 seals, 7 trumpets, and 7 bowls. This pattern is not accidental, but a constant reminder of the comprehensive and perfect nature of God's plan. In our own lives, we can reflect on areas where we seek completeness. What aspects of our character or relationships need to be completed to more fully reflect the divine image? The New Jerusalem, described as a heavenly city of pure gold and precious stones, serves as a powerful symbol of hope and renewal. This image reminds us that despite the challenges and tribulations described in Revelation, the ultimate destiny of the faithful is one of unimaginable beauty and perfect communion with God. How can this vision of a glorious future shape our perspective on present challenges? Perhaps by inspiring us to live with greater purpose and hope, even amid difficulties. The Lamb, representing Jesus Christ, is another central symbol in Revelation. Paradoxically, this symbol of apparent weakness and sacrifice is portrayed as the ultimate victor over the forces of evil. This image challenges us to reconsider our notions of power and victory. In a world that often values brute strength and domination, the Lamb reminds us that true power lies in sacrificial love and humility. The white robes, mentioned several times in Revelation, symbolize purity and spiritual victory. This symbol invites us to reflect on our own spiritual garments. What aspects of our lives need to be washed or purified? How can we clothe ourselves daily with virtues such as compassion, humility, and integrity? These reflections can guide us toward a life of greater authenticity and alignment with divine values. Finally, the throne of God, described at the center of the celestial visions, serves as a powerful symbol of divine sovereignty and majesty. This image reminds us that, despite the chaos and conflict described in Revelation, there is an unchanging center of power and authority. In our own lives, we can ask ourselves, what occupies the throne of our hearts? Do our priorities and decisions reflect submission to divine authority, or are we allowing other thrones to usurp the place that should belong only to God? The 7 trumpets of judgment in Revelation represent a series of cataclysmic events that mark the unfolding of the divine plan in the last days. Each trumpet, when sounded, unleashes a specific judgment upon the earth and its inhabitants. These events are not mere random calamities, but part of a meticulously orchestrated cosmic plan. The trumpets serve as a warning, a call to repentance, and a prelude to final judgment. As we examine each trumpet, we are invited to reflect on the nature of divine justice and the consequences of human rebellion against God. It is important to approach this theme not with paralyzing fear, but with a sense of reverence and spiritual urgency. The first trumpet announces a hail and firestorm mixed with blood, devastating a third of the earth's vegetation. This image evokes memories of the plagues of Egypt, suggesting that God still uses nature as an instrument of his judgment. The impact on vegetation makes us think about our relationship with the environment and how our stewardship, or lack thereof, of creation can have cosmic consequences. What changes could we make in our daily lives to be better stewards of the planet? Perhaps adopting more sustainable practices or supporting environmental conservation initiatives is a practical response to this apocalyptic vision. With the sounding of the second trumpet, a burning mountain is cast into the sea, turning a third of the waters into blood. This dramatic vision reminds us of the fragility of marine ecosystems and the vital importance of the oceans to life on Earth. The symbolism of blood evokes the idea of spilled life, perhaps a comment on how our actions can lead to the destruction of marine life. How can we be more conscious of the impact of our choices on the oceans? Reducing plastic use, choosing sustainable seafood, or supporting marine conservation organizations are practical steps we can take. The third trumpet brings a star called wormwood, which falls on rivers and springs, making the waters bitter and undrinkable. This powerful image makes us reflect on the preciousness of fresh water and how we often take it for granted. In a world where many still struggle to access clean water, this vision serves as a warning about the importance of preserving and equitably distributing this vital resource. How about committing to reducing water waste at home, or supporting projects that bring clean water to needy communities? The sounding of the fourth trumpet results in the partial darkening of the sun, moon, and stars, reducing the light of day and night by a third. This disturbance of the celestial bodies reminds us of the delicate order of the cosmos and our dependence on the fundamental structures of creation. The reduction of light may symbolize a decrease in spiritual understanding or the perceived presence of the divine in the world. How can we be bearers of light in times of spiritual darkness? Perhaps through acts of kindness, sharing words of hope, or simply being an example of integrity in our sphere of influence. The fifth trumpet releases a plague of demonic locusts from the abyss, bringing torment to those who do not have God's seal. This disturbing vision makes us think about the reality of spiritual evil and the importance of divine protection. The locusts, unable to kill, inflict intense pain, reminding us that sometimes suffering can be a call to repentance. How can we strengthen our spiritual armor to resist negative influences in our lives? Practices such as regular prayer, scripture study, or participating in a faith community can be ways to seal ourselves against the forces of evil. With the sixth trumpet, 4 angels are released to kill a third of humanity. This shocking vision confronts us with the reality of divine judgment and the seriousness of sin. However, it is crucial to remember that the purpose of judgment in Revelation is not just punishment, but also redemption, a final call to repentance. How can we live with a sense of spiritual urgency without falling into alarmism or fatalism? Perhaps by focusing on living each day with purpose, treating each interaction as an opportunity to demonstrate love and grace. The seventh and final trumpet announces the consummation of God's kingdom and the final judgment. This climactic moment marks the transition from the present time to eternity, where God's justice will be fully manifested. It is a powerful reminder that history has a purpose and a final destiny. How can this eternal perspective shape our priorities and daily decisions? Perhaps by inspiring us to invest more in relationships and actions that have eternal value, rather than pursuing merely temporary gains. The 7 trumpets can also be seen as a commentary on the cycles of human history. Wars, natural disasters, economic crises, all these events echo the calamities described in Revelation. However, the message is not one of despair, but of hope in God's sovereignty over all events. How can we maintain hope and faith in times of global crisis? Perhaps by seeking opportunities to be agents of positive change, even on a small scale, trusting that our actions can have an impact beyond what we can see. The symbolism of the trumpets themselves is significant. In ancient Israel, trumpets were used to gather the people, announce festivals, and warn of impending danger. In the context of Revelation, they serve all these functions, calling the faithful, announcing God's ultimate triumph, and warning of impending judgment. How can we be attentive to the trumpet calls in our own lives, those moments that call us to greater spiritual awareness or action? It is important to note that even amidst these severe judgments, there are evidences of God's mercy. The judgments are gradual and limited in scope, giving an opportunity for repentance. Furthermore, those marked with the seal of God are protected, reminding us of divine faithfulness, even in times of tribulation. How can we cultivate a grateful heart for God's mercy in our daily lives? Perhaps by starting each day recognizing His blessings or practicing forgiveness as a reflection of the grace we have received. Finally, the 7 trumpets invite us to a broader perspective on history and our place within it. They remind us that we are part of a cosmic narrative that extends beyond our immediate concerns. This understanding can give us a sense of purpose and meaning, even in difficult times. How can we live in a way that reflects this awareness of a greater divine plan? Perhaps by seeking opportunities to be part of God's redemptive work in the world, whether through acts of compassion, seeking justice, or simply being a presence of peace and hope in our environment. Revelation presents us with one of its most intriguing and disturbing images: the demonic locusts released with the sounding of the 5th trumpet. These creatures, emerging from the depths of the abyss, are not ordinary insects, but spiritual entities with the power to inflict torment on the inhabitants of the earth. Their appearance marks a critical moment in the apocalyptic narrative, symbolizing an invasion of the spiritual realm into the physical world. The detailed description of these beings invites us to reflect on the nature of spiritual evil and its manifestations in our world. As we examine this phenomenon, we are challenged to consider how we can strengthen our spiritual resistance against the negative forces that surround us. The origin of the demonic locusts in the abyss is significant. The abyss, often mentioned in scriptures as a place of confinement for evil spirits, suggests that these creatures were previously contained, now released as part of divine judgment. This controlled release reminds us that even in moments of apparent chaos, there is a greater purpose at work. In our daily lives, we may sometimes feel overwhelmed by invasions of negativity or temptation. How can we maintain the perspective that God remains in control, even when facing intense spiritual challenges? The physical description of the locusts is a surreal blend of natural and supernatural elements. With bodies of horses, human faces, golden crowns, and scorpion tails, these creatures defy our normal understanding. This hybridity may symbolize the deceptive nature of evil, which often presents itself in attractive or familiar forms, but hides a destructive core. In our age of abundant and often conflicting information, how can we develop the discernment to recognize spiritual poison, even when it comes disguised as something seemingly harmless or even appealing? An intriguing aspect of the demonic locusts is their inability to kill. Their power is limited to inflicting torment for a specific period of 5 months. This detail reminds us that evil, no matter how powerful it appears, operates within limits set by God. The torment without death can be seen as a final opportunity for repentance, an urgent call to change before it is too late. In our own lives, how can we view moments of torment, whether difficulties, temptations, or crises, as opportunities for spiritual growth and renewal? The immunity of those with the seal of God from the locust's attack is a crucial element of this vision. This seal is not physical protection but a sign of spiritual belonging and faithfulness. In current times, where we may feel vulnerable to various forms of spiritual attack, how can we cultivate a strong spiritual identity that protects us? Practices such as regular prayer, scripture study, fellowship with other believers, and acts of service can be ways to strengthen our spiritual seal. The sound produced by the locusts is compared to the noise of war chariots, evoking a sense of terror and inevitability. This detail reminds us of the intimidating power that negative spiritual forces can have over our psyche. Fear and anxiety can be powerful weapons used against us. How can we cultivate inner peace that resists the noise of fear and negativity? Techniques such as mindfulness, meditation on positive spiritual truths, or simply practicing daily gratitude can be valuable tools. The specific duration of the torment, 5 months, is intriguing. Some scholars relate this to the natural life cycle of locusts, while others see symbolic meaning in this number. Regardless of the exact interpretation, the specificity of the time reminds us that periods of trial in our lives have a determined end. When we go through difficult times, how can we keep the perspective that this too shall pass? Keeping a gratitude journal, Sharing our struggles with trusted friends, or reflecting on past challenges we have overcome, can help us maintain this perspective. The desire for death expressed by those tormented by the locusts is a grim but revealing detail. It represents the extreme despair caused by this judgment. However, the inability to die can be seen as a form of mercy, giving more time for reflection and potential repentance. In our society, where many struggle with suicidal thoughts or deep depression, how can we be agents of hope and support? Perhaps through mental health first aid training, volunteering with support hotlines, or simply being available to listen without judgment to those who are suffering. The leadership of the locusts by a king named Abaddon in Hebrew or Apollyon in Greek, both meaning destroyer, adds another layer of meaning. This figure represents the organized and intentional nature of evil forces. They are not merely random chaos, but entities with purpose and direction. In our lives, how can we recognize and resist negative influences that seem organized to bring us down? Developing a personal spiritual defense plan, identifying our vulnerabilities and strengthening our areas of weakness can be a proactive approach. The vision of the demonic locusts also serves as a vivid reminder of the reality of the spiritual world. In an age of skepticism and materialism, this image challenges us to seriously consider the non-physical dimensions of existence. How can we cultivate a healthy awareness of the spiritual without falling into superstition or paranoia? Balanced education on spiritual topics, open dialogue with trusted mentors, and regular practice of spiritual disciplines can help us navigate this complex territory. The contrast between the demonic locusts and the faithful sealed by God illustrates a fundamental truth about spiritual identity and belonging. Our spiritual affiliations have real consequences. In a world that often minimizes the importance of personal beliefs, how can we live in a way that consciously reflects our spiritual identity? Perhaps through consistent ethical choices in work and relationships, active involvement in causes that reflect our values, or simply treating others with respect and compassion as a reflection of our faith. Finally, the vision of the demonic locusts reminds us of the importance of spiritual vigilance. Just as these creatures appear unexpectedly, spiritual challenges can arise in our lives when we least expect them. How can we stay spiritually awake and prepared? Practices such as regular self-examination, accountability to trusted friends, and maintaining a consistent spiritual routine can help us stay alert and resilient in the face of challenges we may encounter. The abyss, mentioned in Revelation, is a powerful image evoking depth, darkness, and a sense of spiritual confinement. This concept is not exclusive to Revelation, but appears in various religious and mythological traditions, usually representing a place of punishment or exile for evil beings. In the context of Revelation, the abyss gains special significance as the location from which demonic forces emerge during the end times. The opening of this pit marks a crucial moment in the apocalyptic narrative, signaling an intensification of spiritual conflict and a pouring out of chaos into the physical world. As we explore this concept, we are invited to reflect on the spiritual realities that surround us and how they can influence our everyday experience. The description of the abyss as a pit suggests an unfathomable depth, perhaps symbolizing the vastness and incomprehensibility of the spiritual realm. This image reminds us that there are aspects of reality beyond our immediate understanding. In our daily lives, how do we deal with the mysteries and uncertainties we face? Perhaps we can cultivate an attitude of humility and openness, recognizing that not everything in life can be easily explained or controlled. Practices such as meditation or philosophical reflection can help us become more comfortable with the unknown and the mysterious in our lives. The act of an angel receiving the key to the abyss is significant, indicating that access to this realm is under divine control. Even the darkest forces do not operate independently, but within limits established by God. This perspective can be comforting when we feel overwhelmed by negative circumstances or malign influences in our lives. How can we maintain trust in divine sovereignty even in times of apparent chaos? Perhaps by keeping a gratitude journal, focusing on examples of goodness and beauty around us, or reflecting on past moments where we experienced divine guidance or protection. The smoke emerging from the abyss, darkening the sun and the air, can be interpreted as a tangible manifestation of negative spiritual influences in the physical world. This image reminds us that spiritual realities can have concrete impacts on our lived experience. In our era of global challenges such as climate change, pandemics, and geopolitical conflicts, how can we discern the spiritual dimensions of these problems? Perhaps through a deeper analysis of the ethical and moral roots of these issues, or by seeking solutions that address not only the symptoms, but also the underlying spiritual causes. The locusts that emerge from the smoke, described in vivid and surreal detail, represent a physical manifestation of malevolent spiritual forces. Their hybrid appearance, part animal, part human, part war machine, may symbolize the distorted and unnatural nature of evil. In our daily lives, how can we be alert to the subtle manifestations of evil that may appear attractive or harmless at first glance? Developing a critical sense, practicing discernment in our media and entertainment choices, and seeking counsel from wise mentors can sharpen our spiritual perception. The power given to the locust to torment but not kill is an intriguing detail. This can be seen as a reflection of the nature of spiritual evil, capable of causing significant suffering, but ultimately limited in its power of final destruction. How can we apply this understanding to the challenges and temptations we face? Perhaps by recognizing that no matter how difficult our struggles, they do not have the power to destroy us completely if we maintain our spiritual integrity. Practices such as positive affirmations, guided visualization, or cognitive behavioral therapy can help us maintain perspective in times of emotional or spiritual torment. The specific duration of the torment, 5 months, reminds us that even the most intense periods of trial have a determined end. This temporal perspective can offer hope in times of prolonged suffering. How can we cultivate patience and resilience during difficult periods in our lives? Setting small daily goals, celebrating small victories, and maintaining supportive social connections can help us persevere through challenging seasons. Additionally, reflecting on past experiences of overcoming adversity can strengthen our confidence in our ability to overcome current difficulties. The immunity of those marked with the seal of God against the locust's attack is a crucial element of this vision. This seal is not a physical protection, but a sign of spiritual identity and faithfulness. In our daily lives, how can we strengthen our spiritual identity to resist negative influences? Practices such as regular prayer, studying sacred texts, participating in faith communities, and performing acts of service can help solidify our spiritual mark. Additionally, cultivating relationships with people who share our values can provide a vital support system in times of spiritual challenge. The leadership of the locusts by a king called Destroyer, Abaddon or Apollyon, suggests an organization and intentionality in the forces of evil. This reminds us that we often face spiritual opposition that is strategic and directed. How can we develop our own spiritual strategy to resist such influences? Perhaps by creating a personal spiritual growth plan, identifying our areas of vulnerability, and actively working to strengthen them. Seeking spiritual mentorship, attending retreats or personal development workshops, and establishing regular self-examination practices can be valuable components of such a strategy. The abyss can also be seen as a metaphor for the abysses we face within: depression, addictions, unresolved traumas. Just as in Revelation, these personal abysses can seem like sources of endless torment. However, the narrative reminds us that even the darkest depths are under God's ultimate authority. How can we apply this perspective to our internal struggles? Seeking professional help when needed, practicing self-acceptance and self-compassion, and cultivating a vision of hope for the future can be important steps in the journey of personal healing and growth. The opening of the abyss can also be interpreted as a moment of revelation, bringing to light what was hidden. In our personal and collective journey, we often face moments when difficult truths or uncomfortable realities come to the surface. How can we navigate these moments of revelation with grace and courage? Cultivating an attitude of openness to truth, even when it is challenging, can be an important step. Practices such as reflective journaling, therapy or counseling, and honest discussions with trusted friends can help us process and integrate new understandings about ourselves and the world around us. The contrast between the darkness of the abyss and the light of the sun that it obscures can symbolize the eternal conflict between light and darkness, good and evil. This duality reminds us of the importance of our daily choices and their impact on our spiritual orientation. How can we consciously choose the light in our daily interactions and decisions? Perhaps through small acts of kindness, choosing to respond with patience in frustrating situations, or dedicating time to activities that nurture our soul and elevate our spirit. Each choice, no matter how small, can be seen as an affirmation of our alliance with the forces of light and life. The vision of the abyss invites us to consider the reality of a spiritual realm that coexists with our physical world. In an age of scientific materialism, how can we integrate an awareness of the spiritual into our worldview? This does not necessarily mean embracing the supernatural uncritically, but recognizing the non-physical dimensions of human experience, emotions, intuitions, deep interpersonal connections. Practices such as mindfulness, exploring contemplative traditions, or engaging with art and music can help us tune into the subtler dimensions of the reality that surrounds us. Finally, the narrative of the abyss reminds us of the cyclical nature of history and human existence. Periods of chaos and order, challenge and peace seem to alternate both on a global scale and in our personal lives. How can we maintain balance and perspective through these cycles? Cultivating a long-term vision, studying history and philosophy for context, and developing spiritual practices that anchor us can help us navigate the highs and lows of life with more grace and resilience. Remembering that this too shall pass, whether in good times or bad, can give us the strength to persevere and the humility to appreciate each moment of our journey. At the heart of the apocalyptic vision of the demonic locusts, we find an enigmatic and terrifying figure. Their leader, known as Abaddon in Hebrew or Apollyon in Greek. Both names carry the meaning of destroyer, a designation that immediately evokes a sense of dread and devastation. This being is not just another character in the narrative, but a personification of organized and intentional evil. His presence as the leader of the locusts reminds us that negative spiritual forces are not simply chaotic or random, but can operate with purpose and strategy. As we examine this figure, we are invited to reflect on the nature of leadership, the power of destruction, and how we can position ourselves against malign influences in our own lives. The dual name of the locusts' leader, Abaddon and Apollyon, is significant. The presentation in two different languages suggests a universality of the evil he represents, transcending cultural and linguistic barriers. This detail reminds us that destructive forces can manifest in various contexts and forms, adapting to different environments. In our daily lives, how can we develop the ability to recognize the universal evil that may present itself in different guises? Perhaps through comparative studies of ethics and morals across cultures, or by developing a keen critical sense that allows us to identify patterns of destructive behavior, regardless of their external presentation. The designation of destroyer for this leader is deeply revealing. It confronts us with the reality that there are forces in the world whose primary function is to cause harm and ruin. This perspective can seem bleak, but it also serves as an important warning. How can we cultivate an attitude of building and creating in a world where destructive forces seem so powerful? Engaging in creative activities, whether art, music, writing, or any form of personal expression, can be a way to counter destruction with creation. Additionally, seeking opportunities for mentorship or volunteering, where we can positively contribute to others' lives, can be a powerful way to resist the influence of the destroyer. The position of Abaddon Apollyon as king of the locusts suggests a hierarchy in the spiritual realm of darkness. This organized structure reminds us that evil often operates in a systematic and coordinated manner. In our society, how can we recognize and resist systems and structures that perpetuate injustice and oppression? Developing a critical understanding of power dynamics in our communities, educating ourselves about social issues, and actively engaging in social justice initiatives can be important steps. Moreover, cultivating the moral courage to speak out against injustices, even when it is inconvenient or risky, is a way to resist the influence of destructive leaders in our sphere of influence. The association of the leader with locusts, creatures known for their ability to devastate crops, amplifies the image of destruction. This can make us reflect on how negative influences in our lives can devour our spiritual and emotional resources. How can we protect and nurture the harvests of our lives, relationships, achievements, personal growth, against forces that seek to destroy them? Establishing healthy boundaries, practicing regular self-care, and cultivating a reliable support network can be effective strategies. Additionally, developing gratitude and mindfulness practices can help us appreciate and protect what is truly valuable in our lives. The fact that Abaddon Apollyon emerges from the abyss suggests an origin in spiritual depths. This can lead us to consider the depths of our own psyche, the darker aspects of our personality that, if not recognized and integrated, can become destructive. How can we face our own shadows in a healthy and constructive way? Practices like therapy, sincere self-examination, or Jungian shadow techniques can help us acknowledge and work with denied aspects of ourselves. By doing so, we can diminish the power these aspects have over us and transform them into sources of growth and self-knowledge. Abaddon Apollyon's leadership over the demonic locusts illustrates the power of negative influence. Just as these beings follow their destructive leader, we too can be influenced by harmful leadership or ideologies. How can we develop discernment to recognize and resist negative influences in our lives? Cultivating a strong sense of personal values, seeking wise and trustworthy mentors, and practicing critical thinking regarding the information and ideas we encounter can be valuable tools. Moreover, staying rooted in a community that shares positive values can provide an important counterbalance to destructive influences. The contrast between Abaddon Apollyon and other leadership figures in Revelation, such as the Lamb, invites us to reflect on the nature of true leadership. While the destroyer leads to chaos and ruin, the Lamb leads to redemption and renewal. In our own lives, how can we cultivate leadership qualities that build and uplift rather than destroy? Developing empathy, practicing active listening, and seeking the common good in our decisions are important steps. Additionally, leading by example, demonstrating integrity and compassion in our daily actions, can inspire others to follow a constructive path. The description of Abaddon Apollyon as king suggests authority and power. However, Revelation reminds us that even this power is ultimately subject to divine authority. This perspective can be comforting when we feel oppressed by negative forces in our lives. How can we maintain trust in a higher authority, even in the face of seemingly insurmountable challenges? Spiritual practices like prayer, meditation, or studying sacred texts can help us connect with a source of strength beyond ourselves. Furthermore, reflecting on past moments of overcoming challenges can strengthen our resilience and faith. The name Destroyer also invites us to consider the power of words and labels. Just as this being is defined by his destructive function, we too can be influenced by the labels we accept for ourselves or others. How can we be more conscious of the power of our words and use them constructively? Practicing nonviolent communication, choosing positive affirmations, and being careful with the language we use to describe ourselves and others can have a significant impact. Additionally, actively challenging negative or limiting labels can be a powerful way to resist the influence of the destroyer in our minds and relationships. The figure of Abaddon Apollyon can also be seen as a representation of the cyclical nature of destruction and renewal. In nature, we see how destruction often precedes new growth. How can we apply this understanding to moments of destruction in our own lives? Perhaps by viewing periods of loss or failure not as ends in themselves, but as opportunities for new growth and transformation. Practices like reflective journaling, seeking lessons in difficult experiences, and maintaining a long-term perspective can help us navigate periods of destruction with more grace and resilience. Finally, the presence of a leader like Abaddon Apollyon in the apocalyptic narrative reminds us of the reality of spiritual conflict. Regardless of our specific beliefs, we can recognize that we often find ourselves in a battle between constructive and destructive forces, both internally and externally. How can we prepare and strengthen ourselves for this spiritual combat? Developing a regular spiritual practice, Cultivating virtues like courage, compassion, and integrity, and seeking allies who support us in our growth journey can be valuable strategies. Remembering that we are not alone in this struggle, but part of a larger community seeking the good, can give us strength and hope to persevere. The association of the leader with locusts, creatures known for their ability to devastate crops, amplifies the image of destruction. This can make us reflect on how negative influences in our lives can devour our spiritual and emotional resources. How can we protect and nurture the harvests of our lives, relationships, achievements, personal growth, against forces that seek to destroy them? Establishing healthy boundaries, practicing regular self-care, and cultivating a reliable support network can be effective strategies. Additionally, developing gratitude and mindfulness practices can help us appreciate and protect what is truly valuable in our lives. The fact that Abaddon Apollyon emerges from the abyss suggests an origin in spiritual depths. This can lead us to consider the depths of our own psyche, the darker aspects of our personality that, if not recognized and integrated, can become destructive. How can we face our own shadows in a healthy and constructive way? Practices like therapy, sincere self-examination, or Jungian shadow techniques can help us acknowledge and work with denied aspects of ourselves. By doing so, we can diminish the power these aspects have over us and transform them into sources of growth and self-knowledge. Abaddon Apollyon's leadership over the demonic locusts illustrates the power of negative influence. Just as these beings follow their destructive leader, we too can be influenced by harmful leadership or ideologies. How can we develop discernment to recognize and resist negative influences in our lives? Cultivating a strong sense of personal values, seeking wise and trustworthy mentors, and practicing critical thinking regarding the information and ideas we encounter can be valuable tools. Moreover, staying rooted in a community that shares positive values can provide an important counterbalance to destructive influences. The contrast between Abaddon, Apollyon, and other leadership figures in Revelation, such as the Lamb, invites us to reflect on the nature of true leadership. While the destroyer leads to chaos and ruin, the Lamb leads to redemption and renewal. In our own lives, how can we cultivate leadership qualities that build and uplift rather than destroy? Developing empathy, practicing active listening, and seeking the common good in our decisions are important steps. Additionally, leading by example, demonstrating integrity and compassion in our daily actions, can inspire others to follow a constructive path. The description of Abaddon Apollyon as king suggests authority and power. However, Revelation reminds us that even this power is ultimately subject to divine authority. This perspective can be comforting when we feel oppressed by negative forces in our lives. How can we maintain trust in a higher authority, even in the face of seemingly insurmountable challenges? Spiritual practices like prayer, meditation, or studying sacred texts can help us connect with a source of strength beyond ourselves. Furthermore, reflecting on past moments of overcoming challenges can strengthen our resilience and faith. The name Destroyer also invites us to consider the power of words and labels. Just as this being is defined by his destructive function, we too can be influenced by the labels we accept for ourselves or others. How can we be more conscious of the power of our words and use them constructively? Practicing nonviolent communication, choosing positive affirmations, and being careful with the language we use to describe ourselves and others can have a significant impact. Additionally, actively challenging negative or limiting labels can be a powerful way to resist the influence of the destroyer in our minds and relationships. The figure of Abaddon Apollyon can also be seen as a representation of the cyclical nature of destruction and renewal. In nature, we see how destruction often precedes new growth. How can we apply this understanding to moments of destruction in our own lives? Perhaps by viewing periods of loss or failure not as ends in themselves, but as opportunities for new growth and transformation. Practices like reflective journaling, seeking lessons in difficult experiences, and maintaining a long-term perspective can help us navigate periods of destruction with more grace and resilience. Finally, the presence of a leader like Abaddon Apollyon in the apocalyptic narrative reminds us of the reality of spiritual conflict. Regardless of our specific beliefs, we can recognize that we often find ourselves in a battle between constructive and destructive forces, both internally and externally. How can we prepare and strengthen ourselves for this spiritual combat? Developing a regular spiritual practice, cultivating virtues like courage, compassion, and integrity, and seeking allies who support us in our growth journey can be valuable strategies. Remembering that we are not alone in this struggle, but part of a larger community seeking the good, can give us strength and hope to persevere. The woes and tribulations described in Revelation represent a period of intense trial and suffering that precedes final judgment and cosmic renewal. These visions of calamity and torment are not mere apocalyptic fantasies, but reflect deep truths about the nature of evil, divine judgment, and human resilience in the face of adversity. Revelation describes 3 specific woes, each marking an intensification of spiritual conflict and earthly suffering. These afflictions are often associated with the sound of trumpets, creating an atmosphere of urgency and gravity. As we examine these visions of tribulation, we are invited to reflect on how we face adversities in our own lives and what spiritual resources we can mobilize in times of crisis. The first woe is associated with the 5th trumpet and the release of demonic locusts from the abyss. This event marks an invasion of the spiritual realm into the physical world, bringing torment to those who do not have the seal of God. The image of creatures that cause pain but not death can be seen as a metaphor for the psychological and spiritual afflictions many face. In our own experience, how do we deal with internal torments, anxiety, depression, doubt, that seem endless? Developing mindfulness practices, seeking professional support when necessary, and cultivating a support community can be valuable strategies for navigating these difficult periods. The second woe is linked to the 6th trumpet and the release of a demonic army that kills 1/3 of humanity. This terrifying vision of mass destruction confronts us with the reality of mortality and the fragility of human life. In an era marked by global threats such as pandemics, climate change, and armed conflicts, how can we maintain hope and perspective? Perhaps the answer lies in focusing on what we can control, our actions, attitudes, and daily choices. Engaging in acts of kindness, working for social justice, or contributing to sustainable solutions can be ways to resist despair and make a difference, even in the face of seemingly insurmountable challenges. The third woe is not explicitly described, but is generally associated with the cataclysmic events that precede final judgment. This progression of afflictions reminds us that crises often intensify before a final resolution. In our personal journey, how can we prepare to face growing challenges? Developing emotional and spiritual resilience through regular practices such as meditation, prayer, or inspirational study can equip us to face future adversities. Additionally, cultivating a long-term perspective, seeing challenges as opportunities for growth, can help us maintain hope even in the most difficult times. The image of scorpion torment associated with the demonic locusts evokes acute and persistent pain. This metaphor can represent the emotional and spiritual afflictions many face: remorse, guilt, fear, or despair. How can we deal with these emotional stings in our lives? Practices of self-compassion, forgiveness of oneself and others, and seeking inner healing can be important steps. Additionally, recognizing that we are not alone in our suffering and seeking connection with others who are going through similar experiences can provide comfort and perspective. The description of a demonic cavalry army led by 4 angels from the Euphrates adds a geopolitical dimension to the tribulations. The Euphrates River, historically a border between empires, can symbolize conflicts on a global scale. In our interconnected world, how can we respond to crises that seem beyond our control? Educating ourselves about global issues, supporting organizations working for peace and justice, and practicing empathy for those from different cultures and backgrounds can be ways to make a difference. Additionally, recognizing our global interconnectedness can inspire us to act with greater responsibility and compassion in our daily choices. The specific duration of some tribulations, such as the 5 months of locust torment, reminds us that even the most intense periods of suffering have an end. This temporal perspective can offer hope amid adversity, How can we cultivate patience and perseverance during difficult times? Keeping a journal to record our thoughts and emotions, setting small achievable daily goals, and celebrating small victories can help us get through challenging periods. Additionally, recalling past experiences of overcoming adversity can strengthen our confidence in our ability to overcome current difficulties. The immunity of those marked with the seal of God against certain afflictions reminds us of the importance of spiritual identity and affiliation. Although this does not mean a life free of problems, it suggests internal protection and strength in the face of adversity. How can we strengthen our spiritual mark in times of peace to be prepared for times of tribulation? Regular practices of prayer, meditation or spiritual study, active participation in a faith community, and living according to our deepest values can help us develop a spiritual resilience that endures even in difficult times. The vivid description of suffering in Revelation confronts us with the reality of evil and injustice in the world. Faced with such visions, we may feel powerless or discouraged. However, these narratives can also serve as a call to action. How can we respond to the suffering we see around us meaningfully? Engaging in volunteer work, supporting causes that address systemic injustices, or simply being present and offering support to someone going through difficulties can be powerful ways to counter evil with good. The tribulations described in Revelation often involve disruptions in the natural order, darkened skies, contaminated waters, plagues of creatures. This can make us reflect on our relationship with the environment and our responsibility as stewards of creation. In an age of climate crisis, how can we respond to these signs of ecological disruption? Adopting more sustainable practices in our daily lives, supporting environmental protection policies, and educating others about the importance of conservation can be important steps. Additionally, cultivating a deeper connection with nature through regular time outdoors can inspire us to greater environmental stewardship. The concept of tribulation in Revelation is not just about suffering, but also about purification and preparation for a new era. This perspective invites us to see challenges not just as trials, but as opportunities for growth and transformation. How can we adopt a growth mindset in the face of adversity? Regularly reflecting on our experiences, seeking lessons in each challenge, and maintaining a long-term vision of our personal and spiritual development can help us find meaning, even in the most difficult moments. Finally, the visions of tribulation in Revelation are balanced by promises of final redemption and renewal. This juxtaposition of darkness and hope reflects the complexity of the human experience. In our journey, how can we maintain a sense of hope, even amid life's tribulations? Cultivating gratitude practices, celebrating small victories and acts of kindness, and staying connected to a larger vision of purpose and meaning can help us keep perspective. Remembering that we are part of a larger story, personal, collective, and cosmic, can give us the strength to persevere and the hope to keep moving forward, even in the most challenging times. In the conclusion of Revelation, John describes the release of 4 angels bound at the river Euphrates, an event that culminates in the death of a third of humanity, underscoring the gravity of divine judgment. This passage is laden with symbolism, suggesting not only the imminence of the end, but also the magnitude of divine justice. The 4 angels, who patiently await the hour to fulfill their duty, are depicted as instruments of divine wrath, highlighting the seriousness with which God deals with human iniquity. The Euphrates, a river of immense historical and cultural importance, becomes the stage for a cataclysmic event. This river, mentioned numerous times in the Bible, symbolizes a boundary between good and evil, between life and death. When the 4 angels are released, they bring with them a wave of destruction that serves as a severe reminder of God's power and the seriousness of sin. In modern contexts, we can associate this with how major humanitarian or environmental crises impact vast populations, often due to human action or inaction. The release of the angels and the subsequent destruction they bring can be seen as a call to reflect on our actions and their consequences. It is an invitation for each of us to evaluate how we are living our lives and how our choices may be contributing to the good or evil in the world. Current global crises such as climate change, pandemics, and wars serve as reminders of the need for change and redemption. Each of these events demands a response from us that is grounded in justice and compassion. We can bring this message into our daily lives by engaging in causes that promote peace, social justice, and environmental sustainability. This is not just a moral duty, but also a preparation for the difficult times that may come. Just as the four angels await the hour of their release, we must be prepared to face global challenges with courage and faith. Understanding that each action counts in building a better future is crucial. Furthermore, the image of the angels being released can be seen as a metaphor for the release of destructive forces that already exist in our world, waiting for the opportunity to manifest. These angels can represent the latent dangers humanity faces, dangers that can be mitigated through conscious and responsible actions. This scenario calls us to act before it is too late. John describes the angels as being prepared for the hour, the day, the month, and the year in which they would be released, suggesting a meticulous divine plan. This reminds us that even amidst chaos, there is a greater order and purpose. Our task is to align our lives with this order, seeking to live according to the principles of love, justice, and mercy that have been taught to us. Visualize the Euphrates today not just as a river, but as a symbol of all the boundaries that divide humanity, boundaries of hatred, ignorance, and injustice. Working to dismantle these barriers is a way to respond to the call of revelation. Promoting dialogue, understanding, and cooperation among different peoples and cultures is essential to prevent the destruction that the Euphrates angels represent. For example, looking at the climate crisis, we can see how inaction can lead to devastating consequences for humanity, similar to those described by John. The response, therefore, is collective action. From adopting sustainable practices to supporting stringent environmental policies, each individual can contribute to preventing disaster. In this way, we respond to the call of the four angels with actions that promote the life and health of the planet. Finally, reflecting on the release of the angels from the Euphrates, we are reminded of the importance of living with purpose and intention. Every decision we make can be a step towards good or evil. By choosing good, we align our lives with divine principles and prepare ourselves to face any challenge that may arise. This not only strengthens us, but also creates a positive impact on the world around us. Therefore, considering the message of the four angels and the Euphrates River, we are called to live lives of meaning and purpose. We must be attentive to the injustices around us and actively work to correct what is wrong. By doing so, we not only avoid the destruction the angels represent, but also build a more just and compassionate world. And thus, John's message becomes a guide not only for the future, but for our actions in the present. Now that you have acquired all this valuable knowledge about the book of Revelation, it is time to reflect on how to apply it in your life. How can you prepare for the challenges and tribulations described by John? What can you do to strengthen your faith and help those around you find hope amid adversities? Think about how the lessons learned can be a compass to guide your daily actions and decisions. Revelation teaches us that spiritual preparation is essential. What steps can you take to deepen your relationship with God? Perhaps you can dedicate more time to prayer, studying the scriptures, or community service. Additionally, how can you be a beacon of light in your community, offering support and encouragement to those facing difficulties? Imagine the impact you can have by living according to the principles of love, justice, and compassion. What can you do today to promote peace and justice in your sphere of influence? How can you contribute to environmental and social sustainability, preventing the global crises that threaten humanity? To continue learning and strengthening your faith, subscribe to our channel and turn on notifications. Don't miss the upcoming content that will deepen your knowledge on spiritual topics and offer practical guidance for living a full and meaningful life. So, what are the next steps you will take to turn this knowledge into action? Share your reflections in the comments, and let's build a better future together.